The bombs have fallen. The cities are quiet in that permanent way that makes silence feel like a threat. The air carries the aftertaste of burning plastic and broken promises. And somewhere in the distance, something that used to be a shopping mall is still smoldering. Your apartment? Vaporized. Your car? A modern art sculpture of melted aluminum and shattered dreams. And that emergency preparedness kit you kept meaning to buy? Still sitting in your Amazon cart, right next to the survival guide you bookmarked but never read because Netflix had a new season of something forgettable? Congratulations! You're now standing in the wilderness, with nothing but the clothes on your back and a rapidly declining body temperature. Hypothermia is circling you like a patient predator, already etching your name into the frost. No tools, no shelter, no government cavalry riding in to save you because, as it turns out, the people in charge were just as surprised as everyone else. The grid is dead, your smartphone is an expensive rectangle of useless glass, and the only tutorial you're getting is the one your ancestors learned 10,000 years ago when they crawled out of caves and decided fire was pretty great. But here's the secret nobody tells you when civilization is still functioning. You don't need a hardware store. You don't need power tools or construction permits or a YouTube video with a cheerful host explaining how to build a deck. You need physics. You need stubbornness. And you need to accept that sleeping in dirt isn't beneath you anymore because beneath you is exactly where you're going to be if you don't figure this out fast. Let's talk location, because where you build matters more than how you build. The apocalypse has turned real estate into a life or death decision, and every option comes with its own unique way of killing you. That gas station you spotted? Already occupied by someone who found the shotgun behind the counter and has developed what mental health professionals would call severe trust issues. That government emergency shelter marked on the old maps? It's a crater now, shaped ironically like a broken promise. And that picturesque cabin in the woods that looks straight out of a vacation rental? Either haunted or claimed by someone who knows how to rig tripwires. Neither scenario ends well for you. What you need is high ground, but not too high. Climb too far up and the wind becomes a cheese grater for your exposed skin. Stay too low and you'll wake up marinating in whatever toxic runoff the apocalypse has decided to contribute to the local watershed. You're looking for the Goldilocks zone of post-apocalyptic real estate. Natural windbreaks are your best friend now. Rock formations, dense clusters of trees, cliff faces that block the worst of the gusts. If you stumble across a cave, you've hit the jackpot. Nature's own bunker, climate-controlled and rent-free. Just do a quick sweep for anything with claws and teeth before you move in. Or don't. Maybe protein is your priority right now. No judgment. Drainage is the silent killer nobody thinks about until they're lying in a puddle at 3 in the morning, shivering and reconsidering every life choice that led to this moment. Water obeys gravity with the kind of consistency that human institutions could only dream of. Sleep in a valley, wake up in a stream. Sleep on an unstable slope, wake up buried. Riverbeds flood without warning. Open clearings become wind tunnels. And anywhere that looks suspiciously perfect probably is suspicious. If your first instinct is, "This looks safe," someone else had that instinct first, and they're not interested in roommates. Now you need materials, and this is where the apocalypse actually does you a favor. The world has become an unguarded hardware store. Fallen branches everywhere, dead trees offering their timber, bark peeling off in sheets, leaves carpeting the forest floor, vines dangling like nature's rope aisle, mud waiting to be molded, rocks sitting there, being rocks, which is actually more useful than it sounds. No saws required, no receipt, no small talk with a cashier who clearly wishes they were somewhere else. Just you and the raw materials of survival. Start with the frame, because everything else depends on structure. You need branches about as thick as your wrist, long as your arm, still flexible enough to bend without snapping in half. You're building a skeleton, and skeletons need ribs. Find something solid to lean them against. A large tree, a boulder, a rock face, or just prop them against each other in an A-frame configuration, which is exactly what it sounds like. Two angled sides meeting at a peak, creating a triangle of space underneath where you're going to spend the night pretending you're not terrified. Angle matters more than you think. 45 degrees is your target. Steep enough that rain and snow slide off instead of pooling and soaking through. Shallow enough that you're not building a sail that catches every gust and sends your shelter tumbling into next week. If it collapses during construction, you start over. If it holds when you test it, you might actually survive until sunrise. The bar is low, but it's the only bar that matters. Insulation comes next because air, surprisingly, is your ally here. Gather everything soft, dry, and organic you can find. Leaves, pine needles, moss, dry grass, bark strips. Pile it onto your frame until you can't see through it anymore. Then pile on more. You want at least 6 inches of dead plant matter between you and the elements. And here's why. Air is a terrible conductor of heat, which means trapped air pockets and all that debris become tiny insulators working overtime to keep you warm. Dead leaves have an R value of roughly 2 per inch, which is actually better than some commercial insulation products. Free of charge, assuming you don't count the collapse of civilization as a cost. Weave smaller branches horizontally through your frame to create a lattice, a grid that holds everything in place. Your skeleton needs skin. Layer the leaves and moss over this lattice and pack it tight. If you can see daylight through your walls, wind can cut through just as easily. And wind isn't dramatic about killing you. It doesn't announce itself. It just waits, patient and persistent, stealing heat 1 degree at a time until you stop shivering and start dying. Seal it like your life depends on it, because your life literally depends on it. Weatherproofing is where you transform your glorified debris pile into something that might actually keep you alive when the sky decides to open up. Find mud. Not dry dirt, not damp soil, but wet, thick, clay-heavy mud that squishes between your fingers like the earth is trying to shake your hand. Mix it with dry grass or pine needles until you've created something resembling primitive concrete. Then smear it over the outside of your shelter, every inch you can reach. This mud isn't just decoration. It's your sealant, your armor against the elements. When it dries in the sun, it hardens into a shell that sheds water like a duck's back, or like someone avoiding responsibility at a family gathering. That grass you mixed in serves a purpose beyond texture. It's your rebar, the reinforcement that stops the mud from cracking as it dries and contracts. Because even dirt needs structural integrity when everything else has lost its meaning. Can't find suitable mud? Bark is your backup plan. Peel it off dead trees in the largest sheets you can manage. Birch bark is ideal if you can find it. The natural oils make it waterproof, which is why indigenous peoples built canoes from the stuff. You're using it because the building supply store is now a memorial to consumerism and bad decisions. Overlap the sheets like shingles on a roof, starting from the bottom and working up. This part is critical. Water flows downhill. Physics doesn't negotiate. Layer from the top down and you've built a funnel that channels rain directly onto your sleeping body. Layer from the bottom up and you've built a roof that actually works. Test your waterproofing before you trust it. Pour water on your shelter and watch what happens. If it beads up and rolls off, you've done well. If it soaks through, you've built a very uncomfortable wet coffin and you need to start patching. Now seal every gap you can find. Every crack is an expressway for wind, moisture, and despair. Stuff them with moss, more mud, handfuls of leaves, whatever fits. A 1-inch gap can drop your shelter's internal temperature by 10 degrees, and 10 degrees is the difference between uncomfortable sleep and medical emergency. Seal it all. Be thorough. Be obsessive. Be the person who checks the locks 3 times before bed, except this time, that paranoia might actually save your life. The floor is next, and this is where most people make fatal mistakes. You've built walls and a roof, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. But the ground beneath you is a thermal vampire. It's cold, it's damp, and it conducts heat away from your body faster than any breeze or rain ever could. Conductive heat loss through direct ground contact accounts for roughly 80% of total heat loss when you're lying down. You could have the best roof in the wasteland and still freeze from the bottom up. Pile more debris inside your shelter. More leaves, more pine needles, more dry grass, small branches for the base layer. You want at least 8 inches of material between your body and the earth. This is your mattress, your insulation, your last line of defense against the cold rising up from below. The ground sits at maybe 50 degrees, your body runs at 98.6. Thermodynamics says you're losing that fight every second you're in contact. Your improvised floor says maybe not tonight. Pine needles are especially effective for this. They're hollow, which means they trap air better than flat leaves, and they don't compress into a useless pancake after a few hours of body weight pressing down on them. Layer your bedding strategically. Sticks at the very bottom to create air gaps, then grass, then leaves, then a thick top layer of pine needles where your body will rest. Even a makeshift mattress requires engineering when comfort has become a luxury you can't afford. Remember to replace this bedding every few days. Your breath carries moisture, and that moisture will condense into your insulation overnight, turning your thermal barrier into a cold, damp sponge that steals heat instead of preserving it. Wet bedding is worse than no bedding. Stay vigilant. If you find flat rocks, you've discovered something wonderful. Stack them inside your shelter during daylight hours to absorb solar heat. When night falls, they'll radiate that stored warmth back into your space for hours. This is thermal mass in action, the same principle that keeps pizza ovens hot and keeps you from becoming a frozen statistic. But wrap those heated rocks in cloth or bark before placing them near your body. Direct contact with sun-baked stone will give you burns, and having to explain both frostbite and burns to any future survivors is the kind of embarrassment nobody needs. Ventilation is the part nobody thinks about until they're gasping for air in a shelter they thought was saving them. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your shelter can kill you, and it won't be the cold that does it. It'll be carbon dioxide, the invisible byproduct of your own breathing, pooling silently in your sealed little sanctuary while you drift into a sleep you might not wake up from. You breathe in oxygen. You breathe out poison. That's the deal your lungs made with the atmosphere billions of years before you were born. And it hasn't changed just because civilization collapsed. In a sealed space with no air circulation, you're essentially suffocating yourself in slow motion. Carbon dioxide is heavier than air, which means it sinks and accumulates at the bottom of your shelter like an invisible tide rising around you. You'll feel drowsy, you'll feel confused, and then you'll feel nothing at all, which is nature's way of punishing you for skipping chemistry class. Leave a small gap near the top of your shelter, not a gaping hole that invites every gust of wind inside, just enough space for air to escape. Hot air rises, cold air sinks, and convection becomes your silent partner in survival. By venting at the peak, you're exhausting the carbon dioxide while keeping the warmth where it matters, down low where your body is trying to stay alive. If you're even considering burning a fire inside your shelter, stop. Just stop. Unless you've constructed a proper chimney with adequate draft, which you haven't because you're working with sticks in desperation, an indoor fire will fill your space with smoke faster than you can say, poor life choices. Smoke inhalation doesn't rank on anyone's apocalypse bingo card, but it should. It's efficient, it's painful, and it's entirely preventable. Carbon monoxide from incomplete combustion is odorless and colorless, the perfect silent killer. It will end you in your sleep without even the courtesy of a warning. Keep the fire outside where it belongs. Test your ventilation before you commit to sleeping. Sit inside. Breathe. If you start feeling lightheaded or dizzy, congratulations. You've identified a problem before it identified you. Make the gap bigger. If you feel a cold draft cutting through your space, make it smaller. It's a balance, like everything else in survival, except the stakes are your continued existence. A candle makes an excellent ventilation tester if you have one. Light it inside your shelter and watch the flame. If it flickers toward your exit gap, air is flowing properly. If it goes out, so will you, without adjustments. Fire is next, and fire is everything. It's warmth. It's light. It's a psychological anchor in a world that's lost all its familiar comforts. It's also the only thing standing between you and becoming a cautionary tale frozen into an artistic pose for future archaeologists to discover. Build your fire outside your shelter, close enough to feel the radiant heat, far enough that a stray spark doesn't turn your carefully constructed debris pile into a crematorium. The distance depends on wind direction and common sense, two things you'll need to calibrate constantly in the days ahead. Finding dry wood is the first challenge. Dead branches snap clean when you bend them. Live branches bend and flex. You want snap. You want dry. You want kindling, which means the smallest, driest materials you can gather. Tiny twigs, dead leaves, shavings of bark. Anything that will catch a spark and nurse it into something bigger. Fatwood, that resin-soaked pine you find in dead stumps, is a gift from whatever forces might still be looking out for you. It burns even when damp because the concentrated resin ignites regardless of moisture content. Physics occasionally throws survivors a bone, and fatwood is one of those rare mercies. No lighter, no matches, no convenient spark source. Welcome to the friction-based hell your ancestors mastered through sheer stubbornness. Find a straight, dry stick and a flat piece of wood. Carve a small notch in the flat piece to collect the dust and heat your friction generates. Spin the stick in that notch, using your palms, pressing down while rotating as fast as you can maintain. The friction generates heat. The heat ignites the wood dust. The dust becomes an ember. The ember, if you're lucky and persistent, becomes fire. Or it doesn't, and you freeze. This is genuinely a coin flip for beginners. You need approximately 800 degrees Fahrenheit to ignite wood. Your hands, a stick, and pure rage can get you there. But expect to spend 20 minutes or more in continuous, exhausting effort. Start this process before your fingers go numb, because fine motor control disappears fast once the cold sets in, and this technique requires every bit of dexterity you have left. A bow drill is more efficient if you can construct one. A curved stick, a length of cord or vine, wrapped around your spindle. The bow motion lets you spin faster with less effort, generating heat more quickly. It's an upgrade worth pursuing once you've established base-level survival. Charcloth, if you can make it, catches sparks like it was designed for the purpose, which it essentially was. Take any fabric, cotton works best, and burn it in a low-oxygen environment like a sealed tin with a small hole. What comes out is blackened, fragile material that ignites from the smallest spark. It's desperate technology for desperate times, which makes it perfect for your current situation. Once you have fire, your job becomes keeping it alive. Feed it small sticks first, gradually increasing to larger logs as the heat builds. A fire needs oxygen, fuel, and heat in constant balance. Smother it with too much wood too fast and you'll choke it out. Neglect it and it dies. Fire is needy, like a relationship, except this one will actually keep you warm. Build a reflector wall behind your fire using rocks or logs. This bounces radiant heat back toward your shelter, effectively doubling your warmth output without burning additional fuel. It's the closest thing to a miracle you're going to experience tonight, so take advantage of it. Here's what you've actually accomplished, translated into the physics that's keeping you alive. You've built a microclimate, a tiny pocket of controlled environment in a world that's become openly hostile to human existence. Your shelter traps warm air and prevents it from dispersing into the atmosphere. The insulation slows conductive heat loss by creating barriers of dead airspace. The weatherproofing blocks convective heat loss, stopping wind from stripping warmth away from your body. The floor prevents the ground from stealing your thermal energy through direct contact. The fire radiates heat into your space, adding energy to the system faster than it's being lost. You're not fighting the cold. You're negotiating with thermodynamics. And for the first time since the bombs fell, the universe is listening to your terms. Will it be comfortable? Absolutely not. You're sleeping in a pile of decomposing plant matter inside a structure made of sticks and mud, while something unidentified howls in the distance. Comfort died with the power grid. Will it be warm? Barely. You'll shiver. You'll wake up multiple times. You'll question every decision that led to this moment. Will it keep you alive? Maybe. And maybe is infinitely better than definitely dead. Consider for a moment what your former life prepared you for. Spreadsheets, traffic, the existential dread of choosing a Netflix show. Nothing in modern existence trained you for this. And yet here you are, problem-solving your way through the apocalypse using principles your ancestors figured out before written language existed. Every person who ever lived in your genetic line survived long enough to reproduce, which means survival is literally in your DNA. You're just remembering skills your species spent millennia perfecting before central heating made everyone soft. Think about what a social media influencer would do in this situation. They'd probably try to film a day-in-my-life video while hypothermia set in, desperately seeking validation from an audience that no longer exists on platforms that no longer function. They'd pose with their inadequate shelter, add a filter that makes frostbite look aesthetic, and caption it something about living authentically before the cold took them. You're not doing that. You're actually surviving, which is significantly less photogenic but considerably more effective. The irony of modern collapse is that it reveals how much we forgot in exchange for convenience. Your great-great-grandparents knew how to do this. They had to. Survival wasn't a hobby or a YouTube genre, it was Tuesday. Then someone invented indoor plumbing and everyone decided they didn't need to know anything practical anymore. The knowledge didn't disappear. It just got buried under layers of comfort and complacency, waiting for a moment exactly like this one to become relevant again. You didn't need a hammer. You didn't need nails. You didn't need a contractor or a building permit or a carefully curated Pinterest board full of rustic cabin inspiration. You needed dirt. You needed sticks. You needed the willingness to get uncomfortable and stay that way. You needed to understand that survival isn't about thriving. It's about lasting. It's about waking up one more morning and deciding that today isn't the day you give up. The world ended. The systems failed. Everything you were taught to depend on evaporated in a flash of light and a rumble that shook the foundations of everything humanity built. But you're still here. You're still breathing. You're lying in a shelter made of forest debris and stubbornness. Warm enough to function, dry enough to rest, alive enough to face tomorrow. Not today, hypothermia. Not today. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow, you do it all again. And the day after that, and every day until this becomes normal. Because normal is whatever you survive long enough to get used to. The old world is gone. This is the new one. And you're still in it. That's not nothing. That's everything.